I just want to take a moment to talk about the the yellow paint phenomenon. I was hanging out with Joel and Matt yesterday because we were recording Mortal Kombat for season 4 of Boss Fight of the Movie. Season 3 of Boss Fight of the Movies I'll be posting episodes of that very soon. We're just trying to get everything set up to where I have a consistent schedule to release those. And Joel was playing. Joel got a PS5 for Christmas, and he's been playing Final Fantasy Remake, Final Fantasy 7 Remake. And we were just kind of talking about all of the problems that game seems to have. He was really big on the fact that the doors were rendered wrong to where they look terrible. And like when you run through the streets, all the NPCs are talking over each other in the dialogue to where you're not interacting with them and actually getting the dialogues. You just walk past them and they're all just talking or whatever. That kind of reminds me of one of the problems that Working Designs talked about with Magic Knight Rare Earth, where all the characters had vocal speaking dialogue, and it just brought down the game to a crawl because the Sega Saturn disk space, or just the fact that you had to pull from the disk space in order to run the game, but like it just slowed the gameplay down to a crawl because of that. So they took all the dialogue out and just left it to just interact with the characters and you get the text print. And it's just walking by and having everybody talk like that, it seems so weird and unnatural. So of course the biggest thing with the current Final Fantasy game, and apparently with other games too, is that there's a instance of where, and I'll show you this, there's a cliff with yellow paint on it to show you that you can climb up the cliff or whatever. Now, I'm from the old school, and I tend to believe that there was a level of understanding from the developers that you can put a lot of secrets and things in the game, give people hints, obviously, but it's better to let the player find out about these on their own so that there is a natural click that happens and understanding how the gameplay works. Now, tutorials exist. There's no problems with tutorials, and you can point these things out within tutorials. It's perfectly fine. But I feel like the level of putting things like yellow paint on there, it can be very hand-holdy. It's kind of a remnant of early 2000s game design that kind of turned off a lot of people from game design at the time. It's kind of like a post GameCube era, early PlayStation 3 or late PlayStation 2, early PlayStation 3 type of mechanic, where there's these incredibly long tutorials, there's incredibly hand-holdy stuff, whatever, blatant stuff, or waypoints I have no problem with waypoints when you have corridor design and it's like everything kind of looks the same as one thing. But if you were rendering a mountain face and you could actually put the texture stuff in the place where you're crawling up without having to worry about painting it, you could have a little bit more subtle design to it than just yellow paint. Which in a tweet that I posted, it was the extent of basically saying, here retard, climb this, or here retard, open this up. That's kind of the issue that I have, is you're not trusting the gamer to basically figure it out. And I know there's statements, and we'll come to those statements about how people are stupid. And yeah, I do see the majority of people not necessarily, I don't know if it's stupidity or it's just sheer laziness, but that's also a laziness that was cultured by the hand-holdy design of games in the post GameCube era of gaming. So we create the problems we have, is what I'm trying to say. So when somebody says this needs to end, the aesthetic of the yellow thing means destructible area, I tend to agree. It's like we kind of have to reinstill a level of trust. And if you're trying to get people to do certain things, you probably should lead them to certain things, or create behaviors, this is going to get really interesting, because this kind of leads into engineering, or social. This might lead into some social engineering type discussions. You kind of, the whole point of a game developer is to basically put people in situations to establish behaviors for certain things in game. So if you want a character to do something, especially from a game development thing, you put them in a situation where, like, right in front of them is this thing. So in the first Metroid, for instance, you come across a wall or a dead end or whatever, and you start shooting at the wall in front of you, and then the blocks disappear. This establishes the behavior that you probably should shoot the walls and ceilings to understand where you might have to go if you find yourself lost at some point. These are establishing behaviors that should help. It's like a communication, like a conversation between you and the player. And there's certain context clues you drop in order to lead people into understanding what the subtext is on what you're talking about. And that's the whole point. That's the point where I'm coming from. This is my old school understanding of how gaming is. But there's a lot of people that seem to have this notion that, like, no, players are dumb and we should continue to insinuate that they are dumb. Now, I'm not saying that that's anybody that in this particular video, but I feel like that's kind of we're sending the wrong message by continuing this type of behavior. So seeing this reminds me of the fact that in the original Dead Space, the focus group playtesters only ever aimed for the head, even with voice lines explicitly stating that this isn't effective, and that's why the first few hallways are smeared with cut off their limbs every 5 feet. Well, yeah, because you're introducing a new idea to an established staple. In a zombie game, we know shoot the head. That's been an established behavior since Night of the Living Dead. Like that's carried over into games like House of the Dead. It's carried over into games like Resident Evil. These are all established things, and they've been established things for a long time. If you're trying to break the convention by having somebody like do bodily dismemberment a la Evil Dead, which is another established behavior, but that's a different franchise, then you kind of have to put that there. I mean, it makes sense to try to instill that, because people are going to go back to the zombie shoot them in the head mentality, like off the bat. That's not necessarily saying they're stupid. That's just saying that they have followed this trend of shooting zombies in the head repeatedly for decades. And this is a new, at the time, Dead Space, which is what you're talking about, the focus group, this is a relatively new situation. So you kind of, again, this is a conversation between the player and the developer. The developer has to instill the fact that, yeah, this is a little different than this last time. We got to do things a little bit differently here. Do this instead of this. And then once it actually gets established within the first or couple like chapters of the first stage, then you can start introducing newer ideas and newer concepts. Yeah, I love how this is still a thing capital G gamers talk about. I bet good money that they didn't have an opinion on this until our favorite Twitter account or whatever said that it was dumb. It's such a nothing complaint, it boggles the mind. Well, it's a nothing complaint to you, but it's not a nothing complaint to everybody else. I think if anything, it's more of a design issue. Again, if we were just kind of using the brain dead notion of blah blah blah, and that's fine, but this is a larger discussion that needs to be had. This is a larger discussion that's actually rearing its head after we've been kind of inundated with culture war talking points. This is going back to just regular ass game design, and just this in itself just seems really weird. It's funny how you have this and this whatever, but if you look at Breath of the Wild, the only thing that really tells you that something's climbable is if there's like texture on it, like the side of a mountain or whatever. And even then, you still have to figure out the right way, or the larger rocks that are easier to get to or easier to jump to, whatever. again, it feels like you're just dumbing down your consumer base, or you're assuming that the consumer base is too dumb to understand that something's climbable, especially when you're introducing the idea of climbing things in a game that really was very minimalistic in the types of stuff that you could do, like, or of that you could do. Going back to the original Final Fantasy VII, there wasn't a lot of like stuff like that was in there. There was certain aspects of it there, but it wasn't to the extent that you're doing now. Again, my biggest gripe about Final Fantasy VII Remake is that all we're doing is just taking a game that already existed and was good on its own, and now we're trying to turn it into something it's not, because we really have no other ideas, or all of our other Final Fantasy games might not be as successful as bleeding the shit out of Final Fantasy VII and infinitum, basically. Bulwark. I can't. Is it bull or boy? I always think boy, but it's bull. The yellow paint thing is weird because there's so many ways to do the same thing but easier. That's how I feel about that. I feel like there's different ways you can implement that. In Guardians of the Galaxy, the alien fauna has a different color plant at the edge, and in Tomb Raider, the cliff you're meant to climb just has a rougher texture. Exactly. I don't know why, but it kind of has this tone of insulting. I don't take it as insulting, but it does have this tone of insulting to it. I think that's one of the issues. So I'm gonna go over this way. Akuma states, the people in the QRTs always sound like, how am I supposed to play this game if it doesn't hold my hand? Eat glue regularly and you have to accept that I'm a dumbass. Which, I mean, if we're to be honest, it does kind of make that assumption. It makes the assumption that apparently modern gamers are not intelligent enough to know that things are climbable. Again, we used to, this is coming from the old school NES player in me, that like we used to run around in games until we stumbled upon the answer. But because we're kind of focused on keeping people engaged in long play times and stuff like that, but we don't want people to get stuck in places and get mad and not play our game. Now we have to create these little breadcrumbs to leave people. Or not little breadcrumbs. These are like gigantic breadcrumbs, and that's kind of where we're finding fault in this discussion. It's not a nothing burger, because if it were a nothing burger, it wouldn't have got so much attention. But there is a larger conversation to be had if you're willing to utilize the observational and philosophical discussion in order to have that conversation. So. Verde said, look, I'm always going to come back to Carlin's quote on this. Imagine how stupid the average person is and realize that half of everyone is dumber than them. And those people will still have the money to buy the game. If only there was a solution to this exact problem decades ago. Again, though, we can't assume that everybody is that fucking stupid. Even somebody who is maybe not the brightest bulb in the box can still understand that there is slight texture differences, or that binds exist, or whatever. I think it's really just the notion that we don't think the best of our fellow man, so we tend to fall into this trap of we have to do the dotted line and arrow point and the hero retard design philosophy. Seems like a lot of people lack basic problem solving skills. Played Devil May Cry 3 again recently and forgot how little hand holding games used to do back in the day. I got lost plenty of times. Yeah, a lot of the older games do kind of have you being lost. I'm playing Metal Wolf Chaos right now, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about it, is that it's giving you a lot of destructible environments with items within them. And going off of previous experience in playing games, I destroy the shit out of everything. If you establish the behaviors and actually like just set people up to expect that certain things go a certain way, it'll be a natural learning curve that exists. But we again we have such a low idea or low expectation of people that we tend to go so far in the opposite end to achieve the same thing or whatever, and that's kind of disheartening. It's you're basically telling us that we can't be bothered to be smart enough to understand how these things work. They missed the entire point that better visual design would have made it just an easy tell to where we should go without breaking immersion. Yes, exactly. It's just another way that leftist thinking infects to dismantle the hierarchy so everyone is equal. Once you notice that process, then you see it everywhere. Of course, you can't change the hierarchy without destroying the value itself. Interesting, but I think we can actually solve this problem clearly by, like I said, again, from a developer standpoint, you have to look at it as if you are having a conversation with your audience. And this is something that writers used to do. This is something that like directors used to do. You have to go in with a good faith notion that people can understand it. I understand Twitter is kind of the biggest problem because we look at the media literacy crowd, we look at everybody else on Twitter, and we assume that humanity is doomed because of that. But Twitter only represents 6% of the population, if even. Probably less than 6% of the population. It's just the loudest minority, basically setting the tone for the entirety of gaming, which is why you're seeing the pendulum shift back to where it was, because obviously the rest of us don't really gel well with these things that are being stated and pushed upon us by the smallest minority. It really is like that. I really don't think that this is a people are stupid moment more than this is the designers are out of touch with their audience, and they probably need to just take a step back or just walk outside and talk to a couple people outside of their sphere just to figure out what exactly they can do to solve it. I look at this as a problem solving moment. This is peak problem solving. We tend to kind of buckle down and only look right at our problem, or we look so much into things that we're working on that we don't take a step back and just kind of like really look at the bigger picture, because we're just so laser focused on what it is. And this is an artist problem. This is a writer problem. Stephen King, despite the problems that Stephen King has, does state that you should write something and step away from it for 6 months and come back and look at it in order to really notice what the problems are with the product, or if it's something that you would like or not. And I kind of like that philosophy. It's really smart and kind of an indication of what you should do. You kind of have to distance yourself away from these things in order to get new insight. But hey, I will we'll talk about this more later, I'm sure. Thank you for joining me for this. I'll see you next boss fight. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.